Hello guys, how's it going? And welcome back to another video. Welcome to the beanbag. Right, so today I wanted to do a little bit of a video comparing what teaching is like here in the UAE to back home in the UK. Now, I will preface before we get into this video properly that it depends on the school that you're at, both in the UAE and obviously the experiences that you have had in the UK. Obviously, the schools will vary, and therefore there will be certain things that I talk about now that might apply back in the UK that don't here, and vice versa. So just bear that in mind. But without further ado, guys, let's get stuck straight into it, comparing the UK with the UAE. Let's go. So before we get into the main teaching aspects of teaching out here in the UAE, I want to talk about the package that you get when you're teaching. So in the UK, and I'm sure this is the same for many other parts of the world also, teaching is just like any other job, right? You apply for it, if you hopefully get the job, you then start working, you have a probationary period, and then you start getting paid. When you come out to the UAE, you get a package. It is an employment package. The employment package is full of lots of different benefits that you just don't get in other parts of the world. So the first thing is you get an apartment. So the apartment that I've got here, I don't have to pay for it. I just have to pay for my living expenses. So I have to pay for what I use, but I don't actually have to pay to live in the space. So that's one thing that's really nice. The second thing that's part of the package, and is actually something out here in the UAE in general, is tax-free wage. Now, that is nice because it means that all of the money you work for, you earn, goes into your bank. Now, I've got nothing against taxes per se, however, it is a benefit that you wouldn't get if you were back in the UK because you get taxed, and the same applies for other parts of the world. You also have health insurance. Now, this is an interesting one because obviously in the UK we have the NHS, and therefore we don't need health insurance to live our day-to-day lives, but out here that is included. So it means that healthcare is also free, and it is part of the package that you get. So moving on to talking about the actual school. Now, the first thing that I noticed coming out here is that there is a very big private school community. I'll say private school community, that's the best way I can describe them. Again, back at home, back in the UK, most schools are state-run, okay, or they're academies, so they are owned and they're academies, and you've got a cluster of schools that work together. And then you have the private schools, the grammar schools, that are slightly separate, but are considered, I suppose, to be somewhat more elite, because obviously you have to pay for them. Whereas back home in the UK, there is generally free education systems available until you get to the university level. Out here, there are state schools, but there are a very high proportion of schools out here are private, which the parents have to pay for. So the reason that that's important is because there's certain funding involved. You know that your parents are paying for their children's education, and therefore typically they have much more of an invested interest in their children's education. So it's just a little bit different, but it is something worth noting. So what about the size of the school? Now, at the beginning of this video, I did say that there are going to be certain things that will depend on the school that you're in. Back in the UK, my first 2 years of teaching, I was in a very small village school, and it was amazing. I really enjoyed it. But I've gone from there being about 80 or 90 children in the whole school to being in a school where there's 80 or 90 children in a year. So the school and the size of the school and the facilities are massive. I've been to a couple of schools in the UAE visiting for various reasons, and they remind me more of the university scene in the UK than they do of the primary school scene. There are iPads for every class. Or for every year group at least. There's lots of facilities available. There are massive wide corridors. There's just, the school has a different feel to it. Now again, if you're from the UK and you're in a large school already, then some of these points in this video might not apply to you directly, but one of the things I've noticed is that the schools out here are generally a lot larger. And the other big difference, I work in primary, but for those of you that work in secondary, is that a lot of schools out here, once they get to year 6, they split them into to boys only and to girls only. Again, that's not something that I've been used to back in the UK, but it is a big difference. So whilst we're on the topic of the size of the school, Another new thing for me, and this isn't new for other schools in the UK, I'm very aware of that, is I've come from a very small school and I've moved on to a very large school. And so what that's meant for me is I've had to get used to this shared planning, working with other teachers within my year group. I'm one of 4 teachers in my year group at the moment. And it's quite nice because it means that I can bounce ideas off my colleagues. And also the planning is shared, which means the planning is halved. It does mean that there is more importance on communication and making sure that we're all happy with what we're teaching and planning, but it is a lot more collaborative, which back in the UK, I was the teacher for both year 3 and 4, and while myself and the other teachers, we discussed things a lot, it was kind of all on you. If you didn't do anything, your class would just miss out. Whereas there are 3 other teachers in my year group, we all have to come together, we all work closely together, and it means that all of our classes benefit from having 4 brains, not just the one. Another thing that is different out here is the general schedule for the week. So in the UK, apart from, depending on whether you're a head of year, depending on whether you manage a specialist subject, from most of the week you are in teaching the children. And regardless of whether you're teaching languages, music, art, you as the teacher are teaching it, and the chances are your school will just have a dedicated PE teacher. At least that was my experience. Out here in the UAE, there are lots of different specialist teachers. So my teaching schedule is a lot thinner, and it gives me much more time during the day to work on planning, to work on marking, to think about new ideas that I can bring into the classroom, and to do those little jobs that I just haven't had time to do previously when I worked in a smaller school. So for instance, music, we have specialist music teachers. We also have specialist PE teachers. Not only that, the children have multiple PE sessions a week. They have swimming because my school has a swimming pool in it, which is incredible. But also, being in an Arabic country, the children have multiple Arabic lessons every week. And for those children that it applies to, they also have Islamic. They have to, be Muslim in order to have Islamic, but the same principle applies. So there are lots more slots during the week and during each day that I can have non-contact time with the children, to sit in my cupboard. I've got a little desk in my cupboard, or to go somewhere down the corridor that's quiet so I can catch up on planning, marking, talking with the distance learners that are still at home, and various things like that. So what about free time? How busy am I? Now, this really is quite a subjective topic, because it just is. Everyone manages their time differently depending on the kind of worker you are, the kind of teacher you are, and what you prioritize, right? One thing that I learned very early on is that as a teacher, your to-do list is doesn't have an end to it. It keeps on going, because you can always think of something else that you can do. Just depends on whether you should do it. And so for me, I do my best to prioritize what is important and what takes priority, right? What needs to be done first. One thing I would say is that my days at work are non-stop, and I go from lesson to lesson. If I have a free period, I go into the little office that I've got, or I go down the corridor. I go straight into doing plans. I go straight into marking. It's very, very choppy. It's very non-stop. You don't really get that much time to take a breath, which I quite like, because it means I get to the end of the day and I've achieved so much. Whereas in the UK, there's a lot more fluidity and freedom almost in your day. But I think for me personally, that has often meant that I've had free periods and I've, been listening to music and I've been doing work, and then, it's just a little bit more fluid. What it does mean is, if you can take this as a picture, back in the UK at my previous school, the morning was always quite solid. You would do maths, you would do your English or your literacy, you would do things like guided reading and spellings, and then in the afternoon that was dedicated to your more specialist subjects. So you would have a PE afternoon, or you would focus on doing some geography or some art or some design and technology. That would be your afternoon, but you could choose where you slot things in. Whereas over here in the UAE, from the morning when you get in to the afternoon when you leave, your day is split up into 20-minute periods. Now, those periods are often stuck together. So I will have 3 periods of English stuck together. So I will have a full hour's English lesson, and the same would apply with maths. But it might be a case that I don't do my maths until the afternoon, because I'll have a different slot in the middle, or a specialist subject will come first thing in the morning and I have to wait to do my English or my maths later. So everything is a lot more structured. but I do find that I get more achieved in a day than I did back in the UK. And before this video gets stupidly long and everyone falls asleep watching it, the next big thing is the timings of the day and the way that the school year is structured. So I have a very early start, but I do finish the day earlier than what I did back in the UK. So the school day officially starts at 7:50, so 10 to 8. Children arrive anywhere from 7:30 a.m. onwards, and I typically get into school for around 20 past 6 in the morning. Now, as a comparison, in the UK, I wouldn't be waking up until 6:30, and I would probably be getting into school at 7:30. So here in the UAE, I have some children getting into school before I even got to school myself in the UK. And I've noticed that the mornings are really loaded and then the afternoons are quite short. So typically after lunch, the children probably have like one lesson and then some guided reading or some maths catch up, or they might have an assembly that they will have. But the morning is chock-a-block. So they start at like 10 to 8 and then their lunch will be at like 12:30, sometimes a bit later. So they've got a massive chunk in the morning. They obviously have a break to separate their time. They have a really big chunk in the morning, and then the afternoon they only have an hour to 2 hours, hour and a half of learning before they go home. And my children at my school, we finish the day at 2:30. So there is a big difference. Now, part of that I think is because of the weather, and also the sun here sets much earlier than it does in the UK at certain times of the year. But there is that also. The other thing in terms of public holidays, we have a lot of different holidays out here in the UAE that you don't get in other parts of the world, especially the UK. So I know that, for instance, we've got like a national day, we've got national weeks. There's things like Ramadan. We don't have the day off, but it's a much shortened day for those children that are fasting. There are lots of different things like that. And then because of the way that the year is scheduled, we have a really long summer where we break up in early July. Again, in the UK, the breakup is typically around the 20th of July, mid-20s of July. So there is a difference in the scheduling of the year too. Typically it's the same, but there are some differences to take into account. So there we go. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are a teacher and you're considering moving out to the UAE, I do recommend it. Personally, I would say it's probably not for everybody, but then moving abroad is a big step. I hope this video was useful, and if you are a teacher and you're considering moving out to the UAE and you want to know anything in particular, or you want me to talk about certain things, pop a comment in the description of this video or go and find me over on Instagram, and I will do my best to create some content that will support you in that journey and that transition. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm very close to hitting 500 subscribers, which is very exciting. And I'll see you next time. Peace out.